Hello, let's learn about the render setup. So up here you can see this teapot with this settings icon. Let's open it. Here we have our current renderer. Our current renderer is the Arnold renderer, which is the default for 3ds Max. Obviously we want to change this to the Corona. So let's click on it and choose Corona. Now, every time that we open 3ds Max, we will have Arnold as our default renderer. So to change this, let's go to the Assign Renderer tab, which is all the way down here. So because I've changed it up here in the renderer, we have the production type as Corona. Let's save this as default so that each time that we go to our render setup, we don't have to do this every time. So let's just save it as default. Leave active shade as Arnold. Now let's go to our common parameters. Here in common parameters, make sure that the time output is as single and the area to render is at view. So we actually want to render what we're seeing in this current viewport. Now in the output size, we want a little bit more of freedom. So let's change this to custom. By default, I have it at 3000 by 2250, but for the moment, let's just leave it at 1500. Make sure that you have this locked, the image aspect ratio, because if you don't, and for example, you just change the width to 1000, the height is not going to change. So if we just lock this aspect ratio, we will be able to change that. So let's leave it at 1500 by 1125. Inside options, you should have these three turned on. We won't have any other box checked, as for example, we have the render hidden geometry. There's no sense in rendering something that's behind our geometry. So please keep all of these boxes unchecked. Inside advanced lighting, we obviously want to use the use advanced lighting option. Do not check the compute advanced lighting when required. Now, if you want a file in which you are going to be saving all of your renderings, you can go to render output and here inside files, you can choose that file. In my case, I want to save each render in a separate file for each client. We obviously don't want any email notification and we're not going to be using any scripts for now. In the Scene tab, in General Settings, we have the Start Interactive Rendering, which will give us a preview of how our rendering will look. However, we haven't set any lighting to it yet, so I would only get a black screen. And your 45-day trail should begin when you start your interactive rendering. So let's not use this for now. And there's no point, for example, if I just start my interactive, don't start yours yet, I would only get a very dark scene because I don't have any light set up yet. We are going to be setting up our light just in a minute. As we move along, we're going to see the rest of the setup here. For the moment, let's go to Performance, and inside Performance, we're going to uncheck the Fast Preview Denoise during render. This will help us see in our frame buffer the actual render with all of its details and not blurred out by this denoising. So let's uncheck it. So that's it for the moment. Let's go back. Now let's go to our material editor. We're going to go inside of this so that we can add a skylight. Now, you might see something like this, which is the compact material editor. However, it's not that recommended to use this one as it doesn't let us see all of the settings for our materials. So let's go into a more advanced level and check the Slate Material Editor. This way, we will see all of these settings for our materials inside this window here. To call in a material for Corona Renderer, we have this search bar right here. So for the moment, I want to add a skylight, and Corona has its own sky, which is called Corona Sky. In order to use it, we just have to drag it over here. This is everything we will need for now. You can see that this component has its own options inside it. The one that matters most right now is the intensity, but we're going to leave it at 1 and then change it once we're seeing how our skylight is acting on our rendering. Let's go back to our render setup. And inside our Scene tab, we will see this option called the Scene Environment. This is where we can add some HDRIs or a skylight to our renderings. As default, we have the 3ds Max settings, which we can find it in the Environment tab. So if we go up here to our Rendering tab, inside it, we will see this Environment option. Let's open it. So this is what the Scene Environment is talking about. We can actually just access it from the render setup instead of going to the rendering and then environment. So let's close it. For now, as my environment, I want to use a single map, which is the Corona Sky, in here. So let's just check it, and it's telling me that there's nothing inside this single map that I want to use for my scene environment. So it's very simple to add one. I just need to grab this one and drag it all the way here to the single map option. We already know the difference between instance and copy, so let's just instance it. Now that this is instance, whichever value I change here will automatically be changed in my rendering viewport. Alright, now let's close everything except for our render setup, and now let's go up here in our scene tab. Right now, if I show my frame buffer, for example, it's going to just pop my window for my last interactive rendering. So what does the interactive rendering mean? It means that it will start to render my current viewport in real time. Now, just underneath our render overrides, we have this material override option. The material override option means that we're going to override all of the materials from our project to a single material. So this way we can control our light before adding materials or textures to it. So let's go ahead and see what type of materials do we have right now. And we can do this by going to our default shading. So by default, 3ds Max has added this random colors as materials to my whole project here. Obviously, I do not want to see this type of materials when I'm rendering for now, because the first step that we need to take is to set up our light, which is really important for now. And we can do that by overriding all of these materials. So why do I want to change the material for each one of these objects? Because each one of these objects is going to produce its own light. So for example, here at the door we have a pink color. So obviously this pink color will bounce all over the place, and it's going to make it really hard for me to control the light and see how my lighting is working. So for this, I will change the material of all of these objects to a white color. So I'm going to check the material override, go and select the material that I want to use. So for now, I'm going to use the Corona physical material. So this material is just a standard white color that is gonna let us analyze our lighting. So let's click on OK. Let's go up here. And now I want to start my interactive rendering. My interactive rendering is basically just a real-time render of my current viewport. So if you haven't yet, please start your 45-day Corona trial. Let's start our interactive rendering. So the first thing that we notice is that this is way too bright. Remember that we've instanced our sky map. So let's go back to our material editor. And inside our Corona Sky, remember that we have this intensity value. Let's lower it to 0.1. Now to start our interactive render again, we can go up here where it says Start Interactive, or we can just hold this Render tab and start IR, which is Interactive Render. Now if you cannot see this tab here, it's because you have the Tools tab toggled. We're not going to be getting into this just yet. Now if you've closed your frame buffer like so, you can click in Show Frame Buffer. Here, let's start interactive render again. This is much more darker and it's actually way too dark. So let's go into our material editor again inside our Corona Sky, and let's give this a 0.3 intensity. That's looking better. Now for our second step, let's add some windows. So let's close everything and add some windows to our voids here. Let's go to a viewport in which we have the orthographic on. Let's just keep this viewport for our camera. Let's go inside this one and let's actually select the clay mode. F4 to show our lines, and let's create a plane for this. Let's go into our standard primitives, select our plane, auto grid, and I'm just going to use this surface as reference. Obviously, I do not want any segments here. And remember here that in Corona Renderer, we will use just a surface to put a glass material on it. Let's reduce all of its segments and just pull it inside so that they're covering the whole void there. Now shift and drag and copy it. I will turn this into an edit poly. So right click, convert to edit poly. Let's select one of the edges and drag it inside. Now for our second window, hold your shift key and copy it. Let's drag it to the center point of this window frame. 2 key just to put this inside there. Let's go back to our viewport like so, and inside our render setup, let's start our interactive. Obviously it will look really dark because we haven't placed any glass material to our windows. So for this, let's go into our material editor, and down here in our Corona tab, we can find this Corona physical material. Let's just drag it over here. Now don't feel intimidated by all of these options here. It's actually really easy to control them. But for now, let's just use a preset that Corona has set up for us. Under basic options, we have the apply preset. If we open it, we will see all of the materials that are ready to use from Corona. For the moment, let's just use the glass option. And we will be seeing all of the settings later on as we produce some more materials. For now, we just want to analyze our lights. Now to apply a material to a object here in 3ds Max, let's go actually to another view. We only need to select the objects that we want to apply this material, which are these 3 windows. Let's open our material editor, and while selecting, I'm going to right click and assign material to selection, like so. Now let's go back to our viewport, and let's again start our interactive render by going to our scene tab and just at the top start interactive. Now why is it still dark? Because remember that all of the objects here are being replaced because of my material override. So my glass is actually being replaced by the Corona physical material, which is a totally white color and it's not transparent. So how do we solve that? Underneath our material override option, we have the objects excluded. So it says exclude list of scene objects for the material override function. So while selecting my windows, I'm just going to exclude them by hitting in this positive icon, like so. Now it's telling me that I have 3 objects which are not going to be affected by this replacement from my Corona physical material. Now let's go back to our Star Interactive all the way up here, and there we go. Now it's still a little bit too dark, so we go to our material editor. Let's go to our Corona Sky by double clicking on it. Let's actually try 0.65. Alright everyone, so this is the basic light setup for our Corona Sky. Now there's still much to learn, but don't worry, we will cover everything as we go along. So keep practicing, and I see you in the next lecture.